Good morning. I'll wait a few moments for everyone to connect. All right, it looks like we were all connected as far as I can tell, so I'll go ahead and get started with our introductions. Good morning. It is December 4th, 2023. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is a continuation of the hearing on the pending petition for change by the City of Solvang for Water Right Permit 15878, which authorizes diversions of water from the Santa Ynez River in Santa Barbara County. This hearing is being held in accordance with the amended notice of public hearing dated August 15th, 2023, and the subsequent notice of additional hearing days dated October 26th, as well as the notice of cancellation of hearing dates dated November 22nd. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded. We will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you're experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, please send an email to the AHO at adminhrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. AHO staff will be monitoring the email inbox and will let me know. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office, Skylar Anderson, Kyle Wooldridge, and Nicole Mullen. Ms. Mullen will be handling the screen sharing of exhibits today and moving along of the slides. So if you're a witness today, you may simply ask Ms. Mullen to advance to the next slide when you're ready during your testimony. And attorneys, you may address Ms. Mullen directly to please bring up a particular exhibit. If at any time I am experiencing technical difficulties during this hearing and I'm not able to rejoin the Zoom conference within a few minutes, one of my staff will call a recess until I'm able to rejoin you. We will take breaks today. We will have a mid-morning break and lunch, and as we have done. But if any of you need a break, please just let me know at an appropriate time. And then for planning purposes, I do plan to hold us to a hard stop at 5 p.m. So we'll try to wrap up at a convenient time before then. All right, I'd like to move to appearances. To do that, I will identify each of you who filed NOIs. If you're representing that entity, please go ahead and unmute and state your name. And I will start with the City of Solvang.
Good morning, Chelsea O'Sullivan on behalf of the City of Solvang and from Richards, Watson, and Gershon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Tilden Kim of RW&G, also here appearing on behalf of the City of Solvang.
Thank you. Good morning.
And Taylor Bond, also from RWG for the City of Solvang.
Thank you. Good morning. All Guest Ranch.
Good morning, Stephanie Hastings of Brownstein on behalf of the Alisal Guest Ranch.
Thank you. Good morning. Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District, ID number 1.
Good morning. Gary Kivista with Brownstein.
Good morning.
And Elizabeth Esposito with Brownstein, also for ID number 1.
Thank you. Good morning. The Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District, or Parent District.
Good morning. This is Brett Stroud of Young Wooldridge, joined by my associate Connor O'Brien. We represent the Parent District.
Good morning. Kachuma Conservation Release Board.
Morning, Sam Bivens, Danny Brand for CCRB.
Good morning. National Marine Fisheries Service.
Good morning, Mary Capdeville from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration on behalf of the National Marine Fisheries Service.
Thank you. Good morning. California Trout.
Good morning, Maggie Hall with the Environmental Defense Center for California Trout. Also on the line, Brian Troutline with EDC Russell Marlowe with Cal Trout, and Bill Trush for Cal Trout.
Thank you. And California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Lena Germanario on behalf of California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Stephen Puccini, also on behalf of California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we also have Brian Demuha and I believe Kit Custis listening in to today's hearing.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do I have anyone else on the line who plans on participating in the hearing other than our witnesses, who's not had the opportunity to introduce themselves this morning? All right, excellent. I think I'll just orient us to where I understand where we are. After our hearing days, which we held on November 6th, 8th, and 9th, we had heard from all of the case in chief witnesses with the exception of Mr. Demuha. On November 9th, CDFW filed a second errata of CDFW 101, which is Mr. Demuha's written case in chief testimony. And CDFW also submitted corrected versions of CDFW 90, 91, as well as CDFW 100, which is Mr. Demuha's slide presentation. So I plan to start today by hearing Mr. Demuha's summary of his case in chief testimony, and then have cross-examination of Mr. Demuha. And then after that, we would turn to the rebuttal portion of the hearing, starting with the city of Solvang. My understanding from our status conference, I think at that time, the city's intent was to present Mr. Nicely first and then Mr. Vanderlinden. I did want to talk briefly about Mr. Nicely's testimony. He would be presenting his rebuttal testimony, a summary of his written rebuttal testimony, as well as a summary of his written surrebuttal testimony. That surrebuttal testimony, I noticed, I've read it, but I know it includes some proposed response to Mr. Custis's testimony. So, and we also have an outstanding motion in limine from CDFW with respect to that testimony. So my intent, and I want to hear from all of you, but my intent today would be to hear from Mr. Nicely only with respect to the portion of his limited surrebuttal that addresses Mr. Demuha's testimony, and then he made, I think, a point about other witnesses' testimony that incorporates Mr. Demuha's testimony, and omit the part about Mr. Custis's testimony to allow me time to respond to the motion in limine and also hear from Mr. Custis first. I think it would be helpful. So that is my proposal, but I think I'm going to hear from you if you have, especially CDFW and the city, if you have responses to that. I'll look to you first, Ms. O'Sullivan. You look like you're off mute. Does that seem like an appropriate, do you have comments on that approach?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinsey. That is exactly what I was going to suggest. And Mr. Nicely has prepared his oral testimony to that effect. So he will be speaking to his rebuttal and surrebuttal combined. We kind of made it an organic discussion rather than, doing rebuttal and then surrebuttal. So he's combined them, but we will, Mr. Nicely will not speak to the Custis portion of the surrebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, we just want to reserve the right to do that in the future, pending the outcome of the outstanding motion limine and your ruling on that. And we are working on our response, which will be filed on the 6th as you ordered.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. Ms. Germanario or Mr. Puccini, do you have a response to that approach?
Yes, no objection to the plan. That sounds fine by us. I will just again note for the record that we do have the motion limine on file. It does include some objections to the surrebuttal by Mr. Nicely as to the other CDFW witnesses. And I will just say also for the record, which is no surprise to you, I'm sure that the department sees no need for further surrebuttal of Mr. Custis at this point in time.
Thank you. Understood. Are there any comments from anyone else about this issue with respect to Mr. Nicely's testimony? And then I'm going to open it up to any other procedural issues we should address before we turn to Mr. Demuha. All right, now I'm opening it up to any other procedural issues we should address before we hear from Mr. Demuha this morning.
Ms. Kinsey, I guess I'll just say really quickly, it's possible that there will be time in reserve at the end of this, you know, the Solvang rebuttal witnesses. I'm not sure that's the case, but I do want to make clear that we understood the schedule to mean that Kit Custis would not go on until Wednesday. He's not prepared to do any testimony today due to some technical issues that he has with his computer system and so forth. So I just wanted to make that known to you in case there was some notion that we would try to accelerate the schedule by bringing him in today.
Thank you, Mr. Puccini. That fits my intent and my understanding. So, but thank you for clarifying that. I think if we do have time today, what I thought we would do is we'd start working through, which I believe I indicated in my ruling, that we'd start working through Solvang's, to the extent we can, Solvang's exhibits and offering and admitting those into evidence and dealing with any remaining objections with the understanding that there's this outstanding motion to eliminate that the city has not had a chance to respond to yet. So I understand that. But we'll see how far we get. It would be good work for us to get through the city's rebuttal witnesses today. So I think we have our work cut out for us. Anything else? All right. I think with that, Ms. Germanario, are you, or Mr. Puccini, are you prepared to call Mr. Demuha?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful. And I see Mr. Demuha. I will start. I believe, Mr. Demuha, you were with us on November 8th, if I recall correctly. So, Mr. Demuha, first of all, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And Mr. Demuha, do you recall taking the oath on November 8th regarding the truth of your testimony when you were prepared to testify in this proceeding?
I did.
And do you understand that the oath applies to your testimony today?
I do.
Thank you very much. And I will turn this over to you, Mr. Puccini. And if, in your introduction of Mr. Demuha, if you can please ask him to affirm his written case-in-chief testimony as true and correct, and also refer to the exhibit number just for our record. Please.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm pleased to reintroduce Brian Demuha. Mr. Demuha has submitted direct testimony in this proceeding as an engineering geologist expert to evaluate the potential impacts of the revised River Wells project on the subsurface and surface flow of the lower Santa Ynez River. Mr. Demuha's direct testimony as revised is marked as Exhibit CDFW-101-2nd errata. Mr. Demuha also submitted a slide presentation that summarizes his direct testimony. This summary as revised is marked as CDFW-100-errata. And as you pointed out, Ms. Kinsey, he also submitted revised exhibits CDFW 90 and 91, I believe, which are marked as errata as well. And with that said, Mr. Demuha, can you affirm that direct testimony as revised?
Yes.
Okay. I think with that, he is available for cross-examination.
All right. Thank you for that brief introduction.
Oh, excuse me. I jumped the gun. I meant to say that he is ready to provide a summary
Okay.
of his testimony before that. Yes.
You could choose to forego it.
I will let him decide how much detail he wants to go into with his summary, but let's start with that, please. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Demuha.
All righty. Thank you. I appreciate it. Just to start off, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of background regarding my professional career and what I've done. First off, I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from California State University, Chico, in geology. I am a registered California professional geologist, and I have been working in the water resource development industry for approximately 18 years now. And so I bring to the table quite a bit of experience with regards to, hydrogeologic assessments of both local and regional locations. I have had extensive experience with working with well siting exercises, well design, well construction. Over my career, I've been involved and in charge of the installation of approximately 100 production wells, monitoring wells, and have extensive experience with regards to testing these wells as well. Anyhow, just wanted to bring that up and bring it to the table just as a context of my background. To get into my presentation, I guess we could start by looking at slide 2. And I'm sorry, it was Mrs.
It's Ms. Mullen, and I think, well, she has it. I was going to say, I believe it's 100. There we go.
Okay. So if we could go to slide 2. Okay. So I think it's pretty clear and it's been stated, you know, in a lot of different testimonies what the project for Site B is and what it entails with regards to the amount of annual diversion being proposed for the project, which is 1,368 acre-feet a year, with a production rate of 2.84 cubic CFS. From the project description, it says that the city is looking at from pumping from well 3, 0.78 CFS, and then from the new site B, production capacity 920 gallons per minute or 2.05 CFS. But what I wanted to also point out in this figure, which I think is what we'll talk about a little bit further on in my my summarization, is the location of the 2 wells near site B right here. And one of them is SY Water 1111, and the other one is WCR 2000. I believe that says 20, which was a new well that was constructed in the last couple of years right by site B as well. And then also, if we could look at the kind of the western edge of site B in the lower portion, you can see that I've placed some arrows there, which is basically there's some modification from what I had seen on the city's project description and where they had placed the proposed area for well construction at site B. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up and show that is based on the distance of where this arrow line is representative and where the location of the river, it looks to be about 200 to 250 feet away from the river where they were considering construction of their new wells. Okay, we can go to slide 3. So at the time I prepared my testimony, the city had provided a number of documents, and the only drawdown document that was prepared was the Stetson Tech Memo number 6 drawdown assessment. And so for my assessment, that's pretty primarily what I keyed in on. And so just as a highlight to some of the things that I looked at within my assessment, I kind of bolded them out on this page here just to give an idea of what they provided and what was missing from their assessment. So within Tech Memo 6, they did provide the hydraulic connectivity value that they were used. They also included the aquifer thickness that they were going to use for their analysis. They didn't provide their storativity value of 0.23. However, in Tech Memo number 3, where they had actually performed the modeling of the area, they did indicate that they had used the storativity value of 0.23, and that's what I assume that they used for their TICE analysis in Tech Memo 6. They indicated that they performed a image well analysis using the TICE analysis, and although they indicate that they use it, they didn't provide any information with regard to how they did that. When I say how they did that, I mean with locations of their image wells or boundaries where the wells were placed or pumping rates that were used within that assessment. However, they did provide the results of their assessment, and tables 19 and 20 indicate the drawdown values that they generated from their analysis. And kind of go into this a little bit further on, but my inclination when I looked at this assessment was to look at maximum potential impacts associated with the project at Site B. And so I looked at towards their September values, and based on the information provided within their Tech Memo 6 document, they had indicated that they were using the variable pumping rates from 140 gallons to up to 550 gallons per September. For 4 wells, that would be 2,200 gallons per minute, or 4.9 CFS. And that's confirmed in the 2021 revised city project. I'm sorry. That's within Tech Memo 6 and Figure 2. If you look at the Figure 2 in Tech Memo 6, it shows what the variable pumping rates and what those were for every month of the year. So I looked at the highest impact, which was the 550 gallons per minute, and then again, I looked at for 4 wells, 2,200 gallons per minute. One other thing to note was that for their assessment, Stetson didn't look at any impacts less than 1,000 feet from the proposed site. And so one of the things that I wanted to do with my analysis was to use the information they provided within the Tech Memo and project what the impacts would be less than 1,000 feet, because as I just discussed earlier in describing slide 2, it appeared that the city had placed the well sites within 200 and 250 feet from the river. Okay. Slide 4. Part of my assessment, excuse me, I'll get a drink here real quick. Part of my assessment included looking at available well completion reports and well data sets from the area around Site B to kind of get a better sense of the geology and hopefully the hydrogeology and groundwater levels and anything basic that was available for around Site B that would give me a kind of an indication of validation for helping to come to better terms with what Stetson had prepared in their analysis. Slide 4 shows a well SY water 1111, which is, if you remember from my slide 2, is located right next to the project site or Site B. And there isn't a whole lot of information provided for this particular well with regards to the construction of it. However, they do indicate that the well is 50 feet deep. Slide 5. And just some context on slide 5 and this well log is important. This is a newer constructed well, I think within the last 2 or 3 years, but one of the things that I pointed out within my direct testimony was that the thickness of this well, of the lithology associated with this well, was quite a bit more than what had been proposed by Stetson and in their assessment of 70 feet. And this well log indicates that you have about 118 feet of said alluvial material associated with the San Ynez River system. We did talk a little bit about this a couple weeks back. I don't know if this is something that I can discuss. It wasn't directly in my my testimony.
I'm going to object to anything that is not directly in Mr. DeMuha's errata direct testimony.
Well, let's hear what Mr. DeMuha, please do limit your testimony to what was in your direct testimony. That is a limitation on your summary today. But you can, I don't know what you're about to say, so you can give it a try and we can we can walk it through. But if you know it's not in your direct testimony, then let's move on to the next topic.
If I could
Okay,
just clarify,
I don't
Ms. Kinsey, my
Sure.
objection, he does talk about this well log and this well, so it's not that he can't discuss that. It's just, my sense was he was going to respond to previous discussions about this particular topic, because there was some
Right.
cross-examination, and that would be the content that I would be objecting to.
Understood.
Yeah, and she's right. I was going to go talk about, some stuff that Mr. Piscini had cross-examined Mr. Nicely. So I can just move on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. If we can move to slide 6, please. So this slide is provides a historic record for SY Water 1111. Although they didn't provide a lot of any real construction information for that well, what they do have is a pretty extensive historic record of water levels for that well, dating from as early as 1935 up to present. I think one of the things that I wanted to point out here, and the reason that I brought it up in my testimony is that the hydrograph shows quite a bit of change over time, especially when you look at prior to 1973. And just for some reference on kind of where I'm going with this is that if you look at the red line that's across the middle of the graph, this represents a riverbed elevation. I will talk more about this in a few minutes, but this particular elevation was taken from a HECRAS survey conducted by the Bull Flat mining company in one of the reclamation plans. But for this one, I use this elevation as it represents kind of the most, I guess that would be easterly part of the project site, upstream from site B. The elevation for that particular station in that survey put the stream bed elevation at 442 feet. And so for context, and why I bring this up is that you can see prior to 1973, 75, around that area, an assumption could be made that the river, the water levels were above the riverbed, and the stream could have been considered kind of a gaining stream. Now I know there's other factors associated with the changes in this pattern with these hydrograph and these water levels. However, I just wanted to point out that over time this hydrograph shows that impacts have occurred in the area and associated with the river. Keying in on,
I'm going to have to object, Ms. Kinsey, as to the testimony that this graph is showing that the elevation of the surface, that the groundwater elevation was above the stream bed, and that it was a gaining stream prior to 1973. He does discuss this hydrograph and groundwater elevations over time, but those particular conclusions are not in his direct testimony, and I would ask that that be stricken.
I'm going to, so I'm going to allow I'm not going to strike the testimony. I think here it's helpful for us to have a full discussion about it. I think this was raised in other testimony. So I'm going to, I think Solvang is on notice of this issue. I'm going to allow it in this particular case. You can cross-examine, obviously, Mr. Demuka when we get to that, about the basis for that conclusion. But I think I would like to explore this issue some, so I'm going to overrule that objection. So you can continue, Mr. Demuha.
Okay. Well, moving forward, I didn't really have any more to say about what we were just discussing, but moving forward with looking at this hydrograph, you can see that from 1995 upwards to, well, through to current to 2022. The hydrograph appears to be fairly stable, and that the groundwater elevations are fluctuating, probably due to seasonal variation between 338 feet to 328 feet. And based on the elevation that I used on this hydrograph from the HECRA surveys, you could assume that groundwater elevations are, between 5 to 10 feet below the surface of the channel. Alrighty. So moving on to slide 7. And I don't know how I'm doing on time, so I can, speed up a little bit if I need to. Just let me know. So slide 7 shows the well that we were just looking at, SY Water 111. In the context of this figure, this was used in the Central Management Agency's groundwater sustainability plan as a representative monitoring well. For monitoring well, for assessing surface water depletion. And kind of what I wanted to highlight in this one was there's a couple things, but first, if you notice on the figure, they give a minimum Thalweg or channel elevation at 300 and it looks like 337 feet. A little bit different than what was provided in the hydrograph that I showed previously. It shows that the channel minimum Thalweg is actually a little bit lower. And I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. But so there is a difference in where people are placing the minimum elevation of the riverbed, and so this one is a little bit lower than the HECRAS survey that I showed in the previous hydrograph. Okay, so we can go to slide 8. So slide 8 is basically a couple things. It's a couple of the profiles that I used in my direct testimony to kind of give a sense of the difference in channel elevation across the site. And so I put a couple of red lines there indicating approximately where these profiles were located with regards to site B. And so as we already discussed here, this 158.96, or I'm sorry, yeah, make sure I get the number right. 158 plus 96 is on the eastern portion of site B, and then obviously said when the 126 plus 74 is at the western end of site B. And from this eastern to this western, there is a change in channel elevation, and I believe looking at 126.74, the survey puts the minimum channel elevation at 332 feet. So looking back at slide 6, if you can move back to slide 6, that would be great. Thank you. Great. So moving back up at slide 6, if you look at the elevation at 332 feet, if we were to move that elevation, that red elevation line down to 332 feet, that kind of changes the picture of what we're seeing in the river. So presumably on the eastern edge of site B, it looks like water levels are below the channel thalweg. But if you look at the western edge of Site B and you look at that minimum channel elevation, you can make a strong case for the fact that, you know, water levels are at or above the channel bottom. Okay. So we can move back on now down to, why don't we just go to slide 12? So getting back into my assessment, what I looked at, I previously talked about using the monthly or the high monthly value of 550 gallons for the month of September, or wells 2,200 gallons per minute. Simply, this is exhibit 12 shows those numbers that were provided. Those, let me just rephrase this. The points that are placed on the graph are representative to the numbers that were provided in table 20 of the Stetson memo. So no change has been made to these points. This is what representative of what was shown in the text tech memo 6, table 20. What I did though, because as I discussed earlier, I wanted to look at the impacts at distances less than 1,000 feet as I projected out to kind of get a sense of what those impacts would be, say 200 feet from the river's edge. And so you can see that first circle around the points on the upper right-hand portion of the graph, and then you can see the second circle kind of in the middle of the graph, which represents a distance of 200 feet. If you follow the arrows over to the drawdown portion of the graph, you can see for year 1, you're looking at about 9 feet of drawdown, and then for year 2, you're looking at, you know, a little over 12 feet of drawdown. Okay. We could go to the next slide. So exhibit 13, what was done in this case, and the way that I approached moving, comparing the max pumping rate of Stetson's technical memorandum 6 and then what the city had proposed for the revised project of 920 gallons, is I basically took the 2,200 gallons per minute and it was divided by the 920 and it gave me a percentage. And taking that percentage, which came out to be 42%, I was able to multiply that by the values in table 20 of the Stetson technical memorandum. And so the points on the graph indicate what those values are after the conversion from at 42%. And so again, looking at what the impacts would be at distances less than 1,000 feet, I projected out to kind of give an idea of at 200 feet what those would be. And so at year 1, you're looking at about 4 feet, and then at year 2, just over 5 feet. All righty. We can go to next slide 14, I believe it is. Okay. So in addition to looking at potential drawdown beneath drawdown values, I also wanted to take a look at stream depletion estimates. I looked at figuring out a way to come up with an idea about what those potential estimates would be and what the potential depletion would be. In-house, we have a spreadsheet that we use, developed by Mr. Custis, that helps us to kind of come up with these estimates for student completion values.
Objection. Ms. Kinsey, objection as to the spreadsheet and Mr. Custis's creation of it. That's the explanation of that is not in his direct testimony. I'd ask that that be stricken.
That's fair. I will strike that portion of the testimony. Go ahead, Mr. Demuha, you can continue.
Okay. So basically what this provides is if you use the values or the parameters that were used in the TICE analysis, like your hydraulic conductivity of 300 feet, your aquifer thickness of 70 feet, the transmissivity of 157,000 roughly, sortivity of 23, and a distance of 250 feet, and the constant pump rate of 920 gallons per minute, you come up with a way to calculate depletion percentages over certain time frames. And so long and the short of it is using these calculations and calculating them out in our spreadsheet. I came up with, after 90 days of pumping, you're looking at nearly 100% of depletion from the river, 95% to be exact. Okay. We can go to slide 15. Another issue to consider with this is also understanding that depletion doesn't necessarily end when you stop pumping, but that there's a time frame that's needed for the wells to recover and for the depletion to stop. So you stop pumping doesn't mean that depletion stops. It just there's residual depletion. That means that it will take a while for the system to recover, get back to zero. So if you don't give it that appropriate time, do so, then depletion can compound on one another. So pumping for, say days in on end and resting the well for 24 hours is not going to be sufficient to bring the system back to zero. And the calculations that were provided, on this table right here kind of give an idea of, what those estimates would be from.
Ms. Kinsey, if I may interrupt, I just want to object to the testimony regarding the amount of time that is needed for recovery. Mr. Demuha does not specify a time frame in his direct testimony for recovery. He does discuss that generally. However, I would ask that specific criteria be excluded.
I'm going to overrule that objection for the similar reasons. I think we're getting into topics that we really do need to discuss and will be brought up, and you're welcome to bring it up on cross-examination. So I'm going to allow the testimony here. Go ahead, Mr. Demuha.
Okay. I'll just close with this, with repeated cycles of pump and the maximum river losses more likely will approach 100%. And so anyhow, we can move forward to slide 16. And these are just some of the conclusions from my testimony. And the first and I stated this before, is that one of the criticisms of the Stetson Tech memo is that, and when I say criticism, is I just mean that I felt what was needed as part of that assessment was to look at impacts at distances less than 1,000 feet. Especially if the city had proposed to place wells within 200 and 250 feet from the river's edge. I think that was an impact that needed to be assessed. If we're to look at the maximum impact from pumping the wells at 920 gallons per minute, kind of an example of how's that information useful, right? So if you look at the hydrograph again and you look at any one of those points on the hydrograph, you can take that number, the 5 feet that was generated from the analysis, and add that to the bottom of the hydrograph. And so I used a time frame from September 2021, which was a recent kind of, you know, seasonal low point for this well, and I applied the 5 feet to the bottom of that, and it gave us, you know, a value of 17 feet below the river's channel, you know, based on if you took into consideration the pumping from the two city wells, the proposed two city wells. And just to reiterate, you know, the pump and depletion calculation shows that within 90 days of pumping, the wells will achieve their maximum rate of stream diversion. Nearly 100% of the wells production coming from the river. And so, as to the assessment, I came up with some recommendations, and I think things that are needed for this project. And one of them would be bypass flow at the gauge that's calculated based on fishery flow needs. The second condition is based on maximum allowable depth to groundwater to the riverbed to protect vegetation habitat. So coming up with a threshold for pumping water levels. This one I think is probably one of the most important aspects of this as well. Is prior to the construction of the city's proposed well, they should be required to install at least two monitoring wells between the proposed wells and the river, so that while the well is on operation and prior to the well being put into operation by any particular operational plan, we could really take a close look at what the impacts would be from pumping those wells, and have two monitoring points between those wells and the river to get us a better idea of actually what the impacts would be for pumping those wells. And so two monitoring wells I think is essential. The monitoring is essential because, you know, most of it, but the things that we're discussing in these assessments are estimates. And so the way to validate those estimates and to determine whether or not those are true and correct, you need to have the ability to validate those. And I think monitoring wells is an important piece of that puzzle.
Ms. Kinsey, I do want to object to the testimony on the rationale behind why he's recommending monitoring wells. Mr. DeMuha does include recommendations, but he doesn't explain them in his direct testimony. I would request that testimony be stricken.
Once again, I'll allow it here. I think we're getting down to the details of his suggestion. He did suggest these permit terms, and I think I would ask. Some of this is anticipating questions I would have for Mr. DeMuha. So I think let's explore these issues. I'm going to allow it, and you can cross-examine him on these topics. Thank you. Mr. DeMuha, did you have additional comments?
I just had one more comment.
Great. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll just move on to the next bullet point.
Yes, please.
I think that one thing that should be considered with the construction of these wells is a dedicated sound port. I know that maybe sounds real specific in particular, but my experience is, you know, a lot of wells are constructed without this portion of the well, and it makes it extremely difficult to monitor or to understand or to monitor what's going on in the well while you're pumping. So one of the permit terms should be considered is that the wells should be designed and constructed with dedicated sounding ports, so that permanent transducers could be installed in without affecting the operation of the wells. And then finally, kind of a little bit in line with what I was talking about with regards to the monitoring wells is when these wells have been constructed and completed, I would recommend that a detailed aquifer analysis and pumping tests be performed on these wells, so that by a licensed professional geologist or certified hydrogeologist conduct the the test so that we can ensure that proper data sets are being collected and so that we can also understand in combination with the data set from the monitoring wells, what the true sustainable operating criteria would be for these wells and understand the impacts that would be associated from pumping these wells. So I think that's again another very important aspect of this project. But other than that, I am done.
Ms. Kenzie, if I may just respond really quickly to the second to last objection by Ms. O'Sullivan. I just wanted to point out to you that, well, I don't recall exactly the objection. It had to do with his interpretation of the stream depletion. And I do note in paragraph 18 that he appears to have testified to exactly what the objection was about. I realize you overruled it, but I just wanted to point out that that would be the paragraph to compare to. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful for our record. All right, thank you, Mr. Dumuha. I appreciate your summary today.
Thank you.
I think with that, I would like to go ahead and move to cross-examination by the city. Sorry, excuse me. Looking at my list here. And we'll, as needed, we can take a break. I realize you've been talking for a little while and we'll see how much cross-exam the city may have. So let me know if you do need a break at some point, Mr. Dumuha. But I think at this point, Ms. O'Sullivan, are you prepared to begin your cross-examination?
Yes, though I would actually appreciate a very
For a
brief
break.
recess.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And then we will reconvene at it's like it's 9:55. We'll reconvene at 10:05 and we'll pick up with cross-examination of Mr. Dumuha.
Thank you, Ms. Kenzie.
So we have everyone back. We'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. All right, and good morning, Mr. Demuha. Thank you for speaking with me today.
You bet.
Okay, so Ms. Mullen, I think you don't mind, I will give you just a list of the exhibits that I'm going to be referring to in this cross-examination to help you hopefully assist you, make it easier. So I will be looking at CDFW 99, CDFW 101, Mr. Demuha's original testimony and his errata testimony. So CDFW 101 and the 101 errata. Potentially CDFW 108, Solvang 74, Solvang 171, and potentially Solvang 187. I think CDFW 92. And CDFW 88 and 86. Okay, and if we could start with CDFW 99, please. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. So, Mr. Demuha, I'm showing you what's marked as CDFW 99. This is your CV, correct?
It is.
Okay, and it's comprehensive of your experience as a hydrogeologist?
As a geologist.
As a geologist, okay. And you're not a certified hydrogeologist, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and your CV doesn't explain any particular experience in TICE analyses, is that correct?
It does not.
And your CV does not explain any particular experience in a Jenkins analysis, is that correct?
It does not.
Okay, and your CV does not show any experience in the San Ynez River Valley, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all for this exhibit, Ms. Mullen. Okay. And in your direct testimony, you state that you performed your own TICE analysis. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
Okay. And a TICE analysis requires the use of an equation with values for things like aquifer transmissivity, time, pumping rate, and storativity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but you did not use this equation in your testimony, right?
Well, I believe in my testimony I did write what the TICE equation was, and that I had performed it, but not with an image well, a portion of it.
So your testimony is that you calculated TICE drawdown values based on that TICE equation.
Yes.
But you did not report these values in your testimony, correct?
No, that is correct, and I said that the basis for me not doing so is that, you know, I wasn't able to validate the drawdowns associated with Stetson's drawdowns, and so
Okay.
so I did do it. I just didn't come up with those answers that were being provided by Stetson.
Okay, so if we could bring up CDFW 101 errata, please, Ms. Mullen.
And I believe that's, do you mean the errata, Ms. O'Sullivan, or the second errata?
Excuse me, the second errata. I
Okay, thank you.
apologize. I'll try to be better about referring to the second specifically. Yes, that's important. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. And, or excuse me, Ms. Kinsey and Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 10, paragraph 13, please. And that might be a little confusing, so I think page 10 doesn't, paragraph 13 is very long, so it starts on page 9. And if we could just zoom in a little bit, for me, it's rather small. Thank you very much. And so I just want to, refresh you to this testimony. In lines 5 through 6, I believe. Make sure I've got, yes. Okay, so this is describing the analysis that you did and actually reported in your testimony, correct?
That is
Mr.
correct.
Demuha? Okay.
Mhm.
And in lines 5 through 4, you state that you elected to use the results provided in table 20 as, quote, as a starting point for your confirmation analysis. Is that correct?
Let me read this, okay? You said lines 4 and 5.
Yeah, well, the lines don't quite line up, so sort of spanning between 4 and 6 there.
Yes, it does say that.
Okay, thank you. And you also say in your testimony that you began a drawdown assessment by plotting the results in table 20, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that you projected out estimate drawdown values from table 20, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you projected a drawdown trend line from the tables provided in table 20, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in this analysis that you've provided and described in your actual written testimony, you are not using that Tice equation, correct?
I am not.
Okay, thank you.
You are correct, sorry, yes.
Thank you. And so you mentioned this, but you couldn't reproduce the Tice analysis from the Stetson report, right?
Yes, I came out, yes.
Okay.
The short and skinny, yes.
Okay, and you're aware that Mr. Nicely in his direct testimony was able to perform a Tice analysis of the project, correct?
That's what he says, yes.
Okay, and you're aware that Mr. Custis, CDFW's other hydrology expert, also submitted testimony, correct?
I am aware.
And you're aware that he was also able to perform a Tice analysis of the project, right?
Well, yeah, he included it in his testimony or his rebuttal, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to go back to talking about the analysis that you do describe in your testimony as a projection analysis. You say that you focused on the maximum withdrawal rates from the proposed wells, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and in your original testimony, you assumed 550 gallons per minute value was the combined pumping rate from 4 wells, correct? From the Stetson report?
You are correct. I made a miscalculation.
Okay, so that was an error. That was a incorrect value.
It was.
Okay, and it was actually a maximum per well pumping rate, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And just for clarification, 550 gallons per minute is about 887 acre feet per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in your revised second errata testimony, you used, I'm going to try to get that right. You used a 2,200 grams per minute, or gallons per minute pumping rate, correct?
I did.
Okay, and that's about equal to 3,549 acre feet per year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if we could go now, Ms. Mullen, to Solvang 74, please. Yes, and if we could just scroll to the second page, Ms. Mullen, so we can see the title of the report. Thank you. So this report was submitted by multiple parties, Mr. Demuha, and I picked the Solvang one, but this is the technical memorandum number 6. You're familiar with this report, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 26, please, section 5. Okay, and this is the description and discussion of the drawdown TICE analysis that the Stetson report includes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And this was performed for specifically what we're calling well site B, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I just want to direct you to the second sentence there that says Stetson evaluated the potential impact of combined pumping from the 4 proposed wells at site B at an annual rate of 2,400 acre-feet per year. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Okay. And so despite that clear statement, you used a value of first 887 acre-feet per year, and then a value of 3,549 acre-feet per year, right?
CFS is, I mean, AFY, if you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you can pull that down now, Ms. Mullen. Thank you very much. And in your original testimony, you also assumed that the city's 2 new wells would be pumped at a rate of 920 gallons per minute, correct?
Yes, that's what's in the application, right?
Right. And in your revised testimony, the second errata, you also used that 920 gallons per minute
Correct.
value, correct?
Mhm.
And the time period that you were looking at was over a 2-year period, correct? Like what Stetson modeled?
Keeping true to what Stetson had done.
Okay. And pumping at that rate at 920 gallons per minute for a whole year would result in 1,483 acre-feet per year, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and the city's requesting a maximum annual diversion of 1,368 acre-feet per year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so 1,483 acre-feet that you used is greater than what the city is proposing to pump over 1 year, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then I just want to clarify, in your original direct testimony, you reported that with no flow in the river, the city's project would result in 16 feet of drawdown after 1 year and 22 feet of drawdown after 2 years, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, but now you're saying that the city's project would only result in 4 feet of drawdown after 1 year and 5 feet after 2 years, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
after my revisions, correct.
okay, and so your conclusions changed by about a factor of 10.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want to now turn to the drawdown, or excuse me, the stream depletion Jenkins analysis that you performed in your testimony. And for that, you assumed that the city would be pumping for 90 days straight, correct?
Mm-hmm.
24 hours a day, 90 days.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you did not discuss whether that is a, typical well operation, correct?
I didn't know.
Okay, so the conclusions that you made would be different if you took into account breaks in pumping for regular maintenance and other operational constraints, correct?
Yeah, I think my mindset though was that I was just looking at the estimation, an estimate based on, how long it would take to pump at that flow rate to come to nearly 100% stream depletion. So
okay,
that is correct. But my mindset was looking at the possible, time frame it would take to hit 100% depletion.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Ms. Mullen, if we could bring up CDFW 92, please. Okay, and if we could zoom out just a little so we can kind of see the title page for briefly. So Mr. Demuha, this is CDFW page 92. I'm hoping it's familiar to you. It's the document that you submitted in with your testimony to provide the Jenkins analysis. Does that look familiar to you?
It does.
Okay, and if we could go to PDF page 9, please. Ms. Mullen, thank you. And if we can scroll down so the last paragraph is visible on this page. Okay, thank you. So this paragraph is explaining certain assumed conditions that are required for a Jenkins analysis. Is that correct, Mr. Demuha?
It is, yes.
Okay. And these conditions listed here, and they continue on to another page. So we'll start with these first three, but the stream has to be fully penetrating the aquifer and have a linear boundary, right? And the stream stage has to remain constant in space and time. Is that correct? And there has to be hydraulic equilibrium, correct? Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could—
Can I just pause for a moment? Mr. Demuha, it would be helpful if you can just say yes. I think it would be helpful for transcript in answering these questions. Thank you. Going forward. Appreciate it.
You bet. Sorry.
Thank you. And in case it's not in the transcript, Mr. Demuha did say make an affirmative response to each of those questions. Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could scroll now to page 8, because I think page 7 is a figure. This paragraph continues on to page 8. Or excuse me, yeah, PDF page 8, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I took you in the wrong direction. PDF page 11, pardon me. The actual page numbers on this document are very close in value to the PDF pages. Okay, so if you can see at the top, Mr. Demuha, that bulleted list that we were looking at extends, and there's another 2 bullets. Are you with me?
I am.
Thank you. And so another criteria that a Jenkins analysis requires is that the aquifer has a constant thickness, correct?
That is correct.
And that there's homogeneous hydraulic connectivity in space and time.
Correct.
Okay, and that there's the aquifer is semi-infinite, right?
Correct.
Okay. So your testimony does not discuss whether any of these criteria are met for the San Ynez River in the particular area that we're looking at, correct?
No, it does not.
Okay. And many of these conditions are not met, is that correct?
Yeah, some of them are not met, correct.
Okay, so in particular, the stream stage is not constant, is it?
No.
Okay, and the stream and aquifer, when I say aquifer, I'm referring right now to the river alluvium. They're not in hydraulic equilibrium, are they?
Can you back up just to the point on the page?
Oh yes, Ms. Mullen, if we could go back up to PDF page 9 at the bottom. And so I'm asking you a question about that third bullet point there, that the stream and the aquifer are initially at hydraulic equilibrium.
So there's
the
no
question—
no groundwater contribution to stream flow, nor does the stream flow contribute to groundwater. Is the question correct?
No, the question is that the stream, the San Ynez River, and the river alluvium are not in hydraulic equilibrium, correct?
I don't know if I can answer that.
Okay, how about this? To have hydraulic equilibrium, you have to have the underlying, so the subsurface water and the alluvium water in this situation, it needs to be connected to the stream, correct? Okay, and that connection needs to be stable, right? For equilibrium, things have to be stable.
You know, I understand all that. I'm thinking about what we have available that would indicate that.
Okay, so Ms. Mullen,
Mr.
Demuha, just one moment if you don't mind. Ms. Mullen, if you could pull up CDFW 108, please. And Mr. Demuha, this is Mr. Custis's rebuttal testimony, which I'm assuming you're familiar with. But if we could go to page 11, Ms. Mullen, and have paragraph 16 visible. Okay, and so in lines 19 through 20 here, Mr. Demuha, Mr. Custis explains that the underflow water elevations at Site B have been below the river bed since 1989, correct?
That's what it says there, yeah.
Okay. And
But-
if you don't mind, excuse me, Mr. Demuha, just one moment. The underflow elevation below a riverbed, if that is true, as Mr. Custis states, then the underflow and the stream bed are not connected, correct?
What station elevation are we looking at here?
Based on that statement, if the underflow at Site B,
Okay.
water elevation is below the riverbed, they are not connected, correct?
So from mid-19, I'm sorry, I'm just going to read it real quick if you don't mind.
Of course.
Yep, that's what he is saying there.
Okay, and so now that you're familiar with Mr. Custis's testimony there, so the fact that we have support that the underflow elevation and the river underflow is below the stream bed, now we can say that they're not connected, correct?
Well, there are dates that are a part of this statement, right?
During that time period.
During those time periods, right? So
Okay.
are you asking during those time frames that?
Yes, since 1989, the underflow has been disconnected from the stream bed, correct?
Ms. Kenzie, I don't mind him trying to answer the question, but I do note that the person who this really should be directed to is Kit Custis. In order to properly interpret exactly what he wrote in his rebuttal testimony, asking Mr. Demuha to interpret that without further context, I think could lead to an answer that's not accurate.
And Ms. Kinsey, if I may have a moment to respond.
Sure.
Yes, so Mr. Demuha said that he wasn't aware of available information, and I'm essentially pointing him to available information to make a point about the Jenkins analysis conditions that he did not evaluate in his testimony.
It still requires him to interpret what that information is without any due warning.
Again, I get to use different documents to cross-examine witnesses and impeach them essentially. So I would say
I understand. Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan. I'm going to overrule the objection. I do want to hear what Mr. Demuha has to say on this point. I think this is a very important line of questioning for me to understand. Mr. Puccini, you will have redirect. And Mr. Demuha, I'll just remind you are, and I think you have exercised this appropriately to say, I don't know, or I need more information as needed. But given your expertise in the subject matter, I think it is appropriate to ask some of these questions. And I think it's fair, given that this is Mr. Custis's testimony. So I'll send it back to you, Ms. O'Sullivan, although I think there is some confusion about the dates. I was getting a little confused. So maybe if you can lay out a question which clearly establishes what dates you're talking about, and we can go from there.
Yes. Okay.
And just to clarify, what my confusion was, it wasn't clear to me. I think Ms. O'Sullivan, you were asking a question about from 1989 to present. And I think Mr. Demuha maybe was understanding that looking at this period of drought, which is referenced in this testimony from 1987 to 1992. So I think that may be a source of some of the confusion here.
Okay, so looking specifically, Mr. Demuha, starting at line 19, there is that from mid-1986 to November 1992. Then there's the comma, the underflow water elevations at Site B were below the riverbed at station 15896 and station 12674 after 1989.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah, okay, so in that period that we're seeing there, the stream bed would be disconnected from the river bed, correct? Or the surface flow. The underflow would be disconnected from the surface flow, correct?
I mean, how far below are we talking? Are we talking it's right at the river bed, or are we talking it's 20 feet below the river bed?
Let's back up a little bit, maybe. Generally, when the river underflow elevation is below the stream bed, the river underflow and the stream bed are not connected, correct?
Yeah, generally.
Okay, thank you. And then if we could go to,
I'm not trying to be difficult with you.
no, you're not. You're being very accommodating. Thank you, Mr. DeMuha. All right, and if we could also go to CDFW 108, which we're at paragraph or page 13, please, Ms. Mullen, and have paragraph 20 visible. Okay, and so in lines 4 through 6 here, that first sentence, Mr. Custis is making a statement about San Ynez Water Well 1111, which you are familiar with.
Yes.
And he's discussing the hydrograph that you also use in your testimony. And he states that the hydrograph shows that underflow water elevations at that well decline during the summer months and then rise during the following winter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the underflow level is changing, right?
Yeah, which
it's
is
dynamic.
Common, which is common for a hydrograph, yeah.
Okay, so it's not static, correct?
Static, meaning it's just a straight line across the
right, it's
the
not
page.
constant,
Yeah.
it's moving, it's changing over time.
Yeah.
Okay, so based on, and Ms. Mullen, we can take down that exhibit now. Thank you so much. So just bringing it back to where we started, that, we walked through what Mr. Custis's testimony includes, and that there's disconnection at different periods of the river bed and the underflow and the stream bed, and the underflow and the surface flow, and the underflow changes over time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay,
I'm sorry.
So
yes.
okay,
sorry.
Great, thank you. And so that would mean that the stream and the underflow aquifer are not in hydraulic equilibrium, correct?
Not always.
Okay, thank you. So again, that criteria for the Jenkins analysis is not met, correct?
At certain times, correct.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could bring back up CDFW 92, please. And go back to page 9. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Okay. And just to refresh, actually, I think we need to be on PDF page 11. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. And just to refresh, that first bullet, Mr. DeMuha says that there's a few criteria listed, but one of them is that the aquifer should rest on a horizontal impervious base, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but the San Ynez River doesn't rest on a horizontal impervious base, right?
I guess it depends on who you're talking to.
Okay. That's fine. We can move on. Okay. So if we could scroll down a little bit, Ms. Mullen, so we can see the end of the page with the paragraph starting with Butler. Okay, and Mr. DeMuha, this paragraph starting with Butler et al. 2001 notes that the Jenkins method will overestimate stream depletion when the listed criteria are present. Is that correct?
If you don't mind, I'm just gonna read through them real quick.
Oh, please do. This will go better if you're oriented, so please.
Okay.
Okay, so you agree that this is a list of factors that if or conditions, if met, would mean that the Jenkins analysis or method would overestimate stream depletion, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And just for the record, those factors include things like the aquifer is not semi-infinite, right?
Yes.
Or there's recharge to the alluvium from sources other than stream flow percolation, right?
Yes.
Or that the gradient flows toward the stream, right?
Yes.
Or that subsurface water levels are below the stream bed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the San Ynez River is a channelized, or excuse me, but your testimony doesn't discuss whether these conditions are met or not, right?
It doesn't, no.
Okay. But several of these factors are present for the San Ynez River, right?
They are.
Yeah, so in particular, the alluvium is a channelized stream bed, right?
Yes.
And so that would not be semi-infinite.
Yes.
Okay, and there is recharge to the alluvium from sources other than surface water flow, correct?
That has been stated, but there hasn't been any definitive analysis or at least explanation of what that is and what constitutes that. And how
Okay.
much actual recharge is being contributed. I mean,
Okay, if Ms. Mullen,
we
if we
would-
could go to Solvang 179, please. All right. And just, I think you can, hopefully that's big enough for you to read, Mr. Demuha, but this is the San Ynez River Valley Groundwater Basin Groundwater Sustainability Plan for the Central Management Area. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and you're familiar with this document, correct?
I am, yes.
Yes, because you cited in your direct testimony. So if we could go to PDF page 449, please. Ms. Mullen, thank you. Okay, and if we could zoom in just a little. For me, those numbers are quite small. I'm looking at table 2C 5-3 there. And Mr. Demuha, you can see this table is labeled the projected groundwater budget for the central management area. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, and so that's including all the water in, water out for the central management area, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to direct you to the last row there before the totals. So the third row up from the bottom, and it says subflow to the San Ynez River alluvium, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you can see that there are some estimated values and a baseline from 2018 in the columns, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's showing the exact number isn't so much important, but that is showing that there is some amount of flow going from the groundwater aquifer to the San Ynez River alluvium, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this an acre feet? Do you know?
Again, the amount is not relevant. I just want to acknowledge that this report is showing that there is some amount of flow.
Well, I mean, that could be important, right? And how much it actually is compared to how much is being taken out. I guess that's another discussion, but
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so that's all I need from this, Ms. Mullen. Thank you very much. Okay. So again, there is some recharge to the alluvium from other sources other than stream flow, correct?
Yes, that's what it says. I'd be interested to see what those, specifically what those sources are.
Okay, thank you.
And I know
and if you don't mind, Mr. Namuha.
Sure.
And then also another criteria that we were just discussing, which Ms. Mullen, if you don't mind bringing back up CDFW 92, page 11, just to have that in front of us. Okay, and if we could scroll down. Is that the last bullet point? Okay, it is. Just wanna. Oh, okay, and if you could scroll to PDF page 13, actually, because this list continues. Okay, and Mr. Namuha, you see there that the last bullet point, that the water level in the aquifer falls below the bottom of the stream bed is listed as another criteria that could result in overestimation of under the Jenkins analysis, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so the subsurface water level for the San Ynez River is below the level of the stream bed, correct?
I don't know if that's a yes or no or correct.
Okay, if we could pull up CDFW 86, Ms. Mullen. Okay, this is the hydrograph that you included in your testimony, correct? For that water well, the SY water 1111 well?
Correct.
Okay, and the riverbed elevation is shown in red, correct?
Yes, for station 156.
Okay, and the blue is the subsurface water elevation, correct?
It is, yes, it is water elevation.
Okay, and I just want to look kind of focus on the most recent time frames there on the right. The blue is consistently below the red line, right?
Based on this elevation, correct.
Okay, thank you.
But as I stated in my summary, you know, depending on which elevation you're looking at, that has an implication on whether the water level is below the minimum channel thaw weight.
Right, but showing here, it is below, correct?
For that elevation, correct.
Okay, we can pull this down. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. So suffice to say that there are several factors that are present in the San Ynez River that would result in an overestimation of drawdown under the Jenkins analysis, correct?
Yes, based on the bolted points that you showed. Yes.
Okay. All right. I also want to discuss your testimony about the changes in elevation to subsurface flow at that well we were just discussing. I'm just going to call it the San Ynez water well to avoid the numbers. Okay, that's my water. Yeah. So I want to talk about that. So you reviewed that subsurface water elevations all the way back to 1935, right?
I did.
Okay, and in your testimony, you attribute the changes, excuse me, Outlook calendar is talking to me. In your testimony, you attribute the changes in the subsurface water elevation to water year type, city well production, and groundwater usage of other wells in that area by the SY water well, correct?
I did.
Okay, and you're aware that the city does not currently have any wells in Site B near SY water, right?
Yes, they have them up above Alisol.
Okay, so any historical trends in subsurface elevation at well Site B could not be due to city well production in particular, correct?
it's still taking water out of the river as it flows down, right?
but not at site B, correct?
No, there's no wells at site B for the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you're aware that the elevation of the riverbed has actually declined after installation of the Kachuma Dam, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and specifically, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to CDFW 88, please. Okay, and if we could just zoom out a little bit so we can see the title page. So Mr. DeMuha, this is the Buell Flat Rock Quarry plan that you referenced in your testimony. Do you see that?
Correct. Yes, I do see it.
Okay, and this report is from 2020, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess updated 2022, so fairly recent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if we could go, Ms. Mullen, to PDF page 86, please. Okay, and I'm looking at section 5.5, that background information. Can you read that okay, Mr. DeMuha?
I can.
Okay, great. And so in the last two sentences of the first paragraph in section 5.5, I just want to direct you there, and it says, in the 1930s and 40s, the riverbed was at a higher elevation than it is now. You see that? And then the next sentence refers to a photo in 1940 that shows an active river channel flowing through the present sand and gravel sorting area, which is now about 20 feet above the river floodplain, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then in the next paragraph, the first two sentences say, in 1950, construction of the Bradbury Dam began about 10 river miles upstream of the site, and in 1956, the dam was complete. The dam substantially altered the flow dynamics of the river, and the dam decreased the amount of average stream flow, controlled flooding that would otherwise move large amounts of bedload sediment and reduce the amount of sediment transported by the river. You see that?
I do.
Okay, and just for clarification, this area that this report is discussing is within well site B, right?
Yes.
Okay. So despite having this information before you about the change in the riverbed elevation, you did not consider in your testimony whether a change in the stream bed elevation could be a cause of the subsurface water decline over time. Is that correct?
I didn't put it in my direct testimony, but I'll just say I completely agree with what's being said.
Okay, but you did not list subsurface water level elevation as a factor, or excuse me, you did not list stream bed elevation changes or decline as a factor that would cause subsurface water elevation decline, correct?
I didn't.
Okay. And in your oral summary, just this morning, when you were discussing CDFW 86, that hydrograph we've looked at, you said that you can assume the subsurface water levels were above the stream bed historically. Is that correct?
In relation to the station 126.
Yeah. Okay. And Ms. Mullen,
on the
sorry, I think I just want to pause. I think this might make more sense if we had CDFW 86 in front of us. Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeMuha.
Sure.
Ms. Mullen, if you don't mind pulling up CDFW 86. Thank you. And so, Mr. DeMuha, again, this morning you stated that based on this, showing the subsurface water elevations and the riverbed elevation in red, that you could assume subsurface water was above the level of the stream bed, right?
Yeah, if you change the location of the riverbed elevation and you move it down to the elevation cited in 126, then yeah, 332 feet, it looks like, yeah.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
if I could just clarify, so this red line here showing the riverbed elevation, you stated in your oral summary that that was the elevation reported in that Buell Flat Rock Quarry plan, correct?
Or station 156.
Yes, and
Which is
that
on the-
again, that plan is from 2020, right?
Yes.
Okay, and we just established that
yeah.
that plan also acknowledges that the stream bed elevation was much higher prior to the Kachuma Dam construction, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that red line is constant in this graph, correct?
For
Let me
that
put it
station
another
elevation,
way.
correct.
Yeah, so the red line does not increase and reflect that higher stream riverbed elevation prior to the Kachuma Dam, correct?
Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, based on that date and what it's showing at 156, if I might be messing up the station number, but yes, based on that report at that time, yes, that's where they got the elevation. That's the elevation they reported.
Okay, so this is not reflecting that the stream bed elevation was higher during, from like 1935 to the 1950s when the Kachuma Dam was actually built, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not, so we can't assume that where the relationship between the riverbed elevation and the subsurface water elevation in those earlier periods, correct? Based on this information.
Could you repeat that?
So we just established that this red line does not reflect the actual stream bed elevation in the earlier time period shown on this graph, correct?
Yeah, it's a dynamic system. It's since the
and so your
construction of the dam,
conclusion about the relationship and that the stream might be a gaining stream prior to 1970s is not accurate, correct?
in this figure at that elevation, okay, so what you're saying is based on the current information, the elevation that we have now, to say prior to 1975, the stream was not gaining. Is that correct? Is that what you're
Okay,
asking?
let me back up for you. I'll break it down into smaller questions. I think I'm asking you too many things at once. Okay, so we've established that this red line shown in this graph is from the Buell Flat Rock Quarry Plan of 2020, correct? And that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that stream bed elevation is essentially the current stream bed elevation of the river, correct?
Correct, at that station.
At that station, yeah. Let's just assume we're talking about that station in particular. And that report also explained that prior to the Kachuma Dam, which I'll represent to you, was constructed in the early 1950s, the elevation of the stream bed was higher than present time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they said what, 20 feet higher?
Yes, that's right. Okay, so looking at the time period on this graph prior to the construction of the Kachuma Dam, that red line is not accurate, correct?
Yeah, it's not representative of that time frame.
Okay, thank you. And so your conclusion that you made in your oral testimony that prior to, I think you were referring to prior to the early 1970s, that the river is a gaining river based on this representation, this hydrograph, is not accurate, correct?
Well, I mean, if you're using this line right here, yeah.
Okay, so let me put it another way. You can't assume, based on the current riverbed elevation, that the river was a gaining river back in prior to 1975, correct?
No, I would have to know what the actual channel elevation was back at that time. Correct.
Okay, and we know from the Buell Flat Rock Quarry plan that it was, at least prior to early 1950s, it was 20 feet higher, right?
Yes, that's what they state.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right. Sorry, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was just
No,
trying to get the essence.
you were not. You were working with me. Thank you, Mr. DeMuha.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. DeMuha. Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just turn and find out, going through my list for cross-examination, Mr. Bivens, if you're here, I was going to ask whether CCRB has questions for Mr. DeMuha.
We do not. Thank you.
Okay, then I will go through the rest of the list. ID number 1, do you have questions for Mr. DeMuha?
We do not.
Alisal Guest Ranch
No, thank you.
and the parent district.
No questions here.
Thank you. I will turn to the fish entities with the other fisheries entities. I don't want to say fish entities. I guess first I'll turn to Cal Trout, Ms. Hall, with the warning about friendly cross. Do you have any questions for Mr. DeMuha?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have you here. Ms. Capdeville, do you have questions for Mr. DeMuha?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn back to you, Mr. Puccini. Do you have redirect for Mr. DeMuha?
I do, thank you.
Do you need a break or are you prepared to go ahead?
I'm prepared to go ahead, thank you.
Okay, is that okay with you, Mr. DeMuha? Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I just want to mention, for some reason, my internet connection's kind of wonky right now. So if I restate questions, it's because it's not entirely coming through sometimes. So if you could just bear with me, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you. I will turn things to you, Mr. Puccini. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. DeMuha, if you're having trouble hearing me, just let me know.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Listen, I'm going to try to kind of go backwards in terms of the questions that Ms. O'Sullivan presented to you, just to kind of keep it fresh in your mind. So I wanted to, she spent a lot of time basically trying to show that the factors that you typically need to have a accurate Jenkins determination, in other words, stream depletion, are absent. And at the end, she talked about a gaining or losing stream. Is it your understanding that you can have stream depletion regardless of whether the stream is gaining or losing?
I'm sorry, it cut out on me. Can you repeat the question?
The question is it your understanding that you can have stream depletion regardless of whether the stream is gaining or losing?
Yes.
And in the situation where it's gaining, that stream depletion is a result of flow being intercepted. Is that correct, or do I have it backwards?
I apologize, guys. I don't know why I'm having a hard time hearing right now.
We can try. We'll try one more time, and then if we need to, we can take a break. So go ahead, Mr. Puccini. It sounds like you need to restate the question.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. DeMuha. So you just said that it's your understanding that you can have stream depletion regardless of whether the stream is gaining or losing. And I just wanted to clarify, when you have a stream that's gaining, how does that stream depletion occur? Is it by interception?
It can be, yes.
Okay. Ms. O'Sullivan was referring to Solvang 179. This is the GSB, excuse me, PDF 449 groundwater budget, shows some amount of flow going from groundwater to aquifer to underflow. You had some concerns regarding the fact that there were no units that showed in those columns. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why is that important?
I think using it comparatively to what's the city plans to withdraw from Site B and what's being put into Site B, or what's being recharged, I guess is the word I would use. That seems like an important aspect of understanding the impacts.
Okay. She also referred to Kit Custis's rebuttal testimony, CDFW 108, paragraph 16. And this is where he was talking about the, I guess the elevation, the bed elevation between 1987 and 1992. Do you recall that?
I do.
There wasn't anything in that paragraph that told you what the condition was after 1992, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. O'Sullivan made it clear, and I don't think you disagree, but let me know if you do, that if you don't have all the factors that are listed for using the Jenkins model, okay, and she went through those, there's 6 or so bullets, then the absence of those factors would lead to an overestimation of stream depletion. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. But there's nothing in what she showed you that explains how each one of those factors, if absent, contribute to what would be an overestimation. In other words, we don't know, for example, if one of the factors is missing proportionally, if you want to use that term, it contributes to an overestimation, correct?
Correct.
So some could be weighted greater than others, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We talked about the Tice analysis, and I just want to ask you, there are factors that are also need to be considered for the accuracy of a Tice analysis, correct?
That is correct.
Are those factors similar or even identical in some cases to the factors that Ms. O'Sullivan identified in the Jenkins model?
Yes, there are some.
I'm going to
that are
object
identical.
to this line of questioning. I think it's outside the scope of my cross-examination and any testimony that's been offered.
Ms. Kenzie, she's asking about the Tice model. I think is well within the redirect in this case.
I think that's fair. I'll allow the question. Mr. Demuha, you can respond.
The question again, Mr.
There are some
Okay.
that are the same for both.
They're the same there both. And so if, as Ms. O'Sullivan tried to show, that some of those factors are missing in this situation, in this area, that would make the Jenkins model less reliable. The same would be true in terms of the reliability of the Tice model, correct?
Correct.
And basically, when we're talking about Tice and Jenkins, these various models, we're trying to get an estimate, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
And as all estimates go, they may or may not be accurate, you know, as applied, so to speak. In other words, once those wells are constructed and operating.
That is correct. And that's why in almost all cases, when you do construct a well, you test the well.
Thank you.
The valve.
Okay. I had a question and it did slip my head, so I'll try to move on. Oh, yeah. So Jenkins is one way that you determine stream depletion, correct? Let me back up just for the sort of sake of resetting this. Tice is about drawdown. Jenkins is about stream depletion, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you draw down the underflow, you want to figure out how long it's going to take for that underflow to be made up, what Mr. Nicely refers to as refilling, correct?
Yes.
So the whole purpose of these two models is basically to get a handle on those two factors, correct?
Yes,
And stream depletion always has as part of it a time variable. In other words, there's a lag time that's associated with it.
yes,
Okay. And that's why you were talking about, using 90 days straight. This is what the total stream depletion would look like over time. And of course, that assumes there's no recharge during that period. But this is the concept you were trying to address, correct?
correct.
Okay. Let's say that we don't want to use Jenkins because we're afraid of an overestimation since some of these factors may not actually be present. Okay. What tool is left or tools to figure out stream depletion if Jenkins is not going to work?
Objection. My cross-examination does not go into other options besides the Jenkins analysis.
That might be fair, Ms. O'Sullivan, but I would ask the same question. So I'm going to allow this recognition. So go ahead, Mr. Zamuha.
Understood.
Okay. I would say monitoring wells. I mean, that would give you, if strategically placed correct in the correct location, that would give you probably a better representation of what's going on.
You said a better representation than using Jenkins.
Yes.
Do you remember, write that. I want to go back to the sort of beginning where Ms. O'Sullivan was asking you about the Tice equation and essentially whether you conducted a Tice analysis. That, I think you realize that Mr. Nicely in his testimony has said something to the effect that you didn't use Tice or use it incorrectly and so on and so forth. So I thought it would be useful to really get a better understanding of what you actually did in terms of what I would say evaluating, as you wrote in your testimony, the Stetson analysis. One thing I recall is that you didn't use image wells. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain why that was the situation?
Well, with the using an image well analysis with Tice, there are certain things that you need to be able to know. And I think I briefly mentioned that, where are the image wells located? Where are your boundaries located at? What are the pumping rates, as well as some other assumptions to be able to know, so that you can validate the analysis.
Okay.
And that wasn't provided, so.
Okay. Just want to do something really quickly here. So looking at your
Did he?
I apologize. I am back.
I didn't know if that was me or you.
We can't see you yet, Mr. Puccini, but it looks like your camera's on. It's just black.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. We're having a quote unquote unstable internet moment here at my office. If it's okay with you, would it be?
I think you can continue. I think that,
okay. No one needs to see me anyway.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Probably be better that way. Okay. I just wanted to kind of walk through really quickly and probably end it after this. The approach or methodology you took to basically validate Stetson, okay? And so I'm just looking at your testimony, the second errata, CDFW 101, starting on page 3. You mentioned the Tice analysis, and you identify, on page 3, the various inputs that you need to conduct the Tice analysis. I mean, it would be fair to say, based on this testimony, that you do understand how to conduct a TICE analysis, correct?
I do.
And it's also fair that absent the image well data that was not available in TM6, as I understand it, I'll just say you had to do some kind of workaround. Is that a fair assessment?
It is.
Is that how you end up with that proportional determination? I think it was the 41 or 42% kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you so you talk about how you did your own TICE analysis. You didn't have the image wells. And without the image well analysis, by the way, I have a question for you. Would the drawdown be underestimated absent those image wells?
You cut out for a second. I apologize again.
Would the effect of not having the image well analysis or the image wells, would that tend to make the drawdown you find to be underestimated? In other words, it would result in a lower drawdown value?
Yeah, I guess it could.
Okay. And anyway, to go back to the absence of the image wells, you did this proportionality analysis, and this is where you made your math error that resulted in your second errata, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as you walk through your analysis, you talk about the various data you relied on, for example, the well completion logs, historical groundwater levels, et cetera, correct?
Correct.
And you do identify the fact that at the time of your testimony, the project description didn't indicate the exact location of where the wells would be in well site B, correct?
I'm going to object. We did not cover the well location in my cross-examination.
He talked about why he conducted an analysis closer to the river. And
That
the reason
is in his direct testimony, but wasn't part of my cross-examination.
I can move on, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. In other words, there were some parameters in Stetson that weren't reproducible. And you identified specifically the methodology you followed to reach your drawdown values. That's all laid out in your testimony quite clearly, correct?
Correct.
And yet, Mr. Nicely goes on to talk about how you don't know how to do hydrogeology, correct?
Objection. These questions are quite leading and going into what Mr. Nicely's reaction to Mr. Demuha, again, I believe is outside of the scope of cross.
I'll strike that question. At the beginning of Ms. O'Sullivan's questions, she asked you about your experience in conducting hydrogeology analyses, correct?
Correct.
And do you have anything more to say about that? I think you said you had 18 years of experience.
Yeah, I mean, as part of, other evaluations in other areas, I've certainly used TICE before as a method of estimating drawdowns in preparation for, projects and water supply projects and whatnot. But I, in the case of this, I didn't put it on my resume, which is true, but I have in the past used it before. It's not a new concept to me.
Thank you. Going back to a question I asked previously about Jenkins and Tice, they are models, they are estimations. Would this be a fair statement? They represent the best available data, but they're not validated. Let me state it differently. In order to have a greater confidence of both drawdown value and stream depletion, would it be your recommendation that you need to do a pump test?
Objection. I did not ask
Yes.
anything along these lines in my cross-examination.
He talked about the need for monitoring wells, and so it must have come up.
No, I think it's a fair objection. So
Fair enough.
strike that question.
Okay. Just checking my notes. Thank you. Ms. O'Sullivan went to some length about trying to determine whether or not there was actual connectivity between underflow and the subsurface channel, and looked at this various hydrographs that that you commented on and so forth. It sounded to me like you wanted to say something more about the I think it was the Sci 111 hydrograph. You were saying something about, well, it depends on location, which I think means the cross-sectional location. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what was being highlighted was the elevation for the station at the upstream portion of the project area. Looking at the downstream portion at the station located further downstream, and there's a difference of what, 10 feet between channel elevation. And so, I mean, applying the water levels that we have on Sci 11, it would be safe to assume that if you're going strictly off those elevations, then it's possible that you have water gaining reach in the western portion of the project area. So there's another thing to consider too, and I don't know if I can bring this up, but I mean, we're talking about flows within the river, right? There is a document in, let's see if I can remember this now, but let me see if I can. I believe it's in Solvang, in the ER addendum, Solvang 19. I could get you the exact location if you want, but I mean, they did an analysis of flows past the gauges and when.
Can I interrupt you? Would that be Solvang 21, tables 4 through 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Tables 4
PDF
through 8,
pages
correct.
18 through 22. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the assessment that was conducted for that, I mean, you're looking at maybe a couple months out of the year where there's zero flow at the gauge, and at other times there's flow. So I mean, we're talking about disconnection and the water levels being below the stream bed, but I mean, those figures, those tables kind of show a story where most of the time there is water in the river.
So
and if we want to pull,
would it be helpful
that's fine.
would it be helpful to pull Solvang 21 so you can take a look at that and explain more clearly your point?
Yeah, we could pull those up.
If we could have Solvang 21, please. And I believe we want to go to PDF 18 through 22, starting at 18. Is this what you're recalling, Mr. Demuha?
Yeah, 100%. So, the table talks about baseline conditions, and then above that you can see in the blue font, medium average daily flows by month for critical water years, and they give like a range of values for different water year types. And this first one you're looking at, at the Alisal Bridge, you got 3 months out of the year where you got zero flow. If you scroll down,
If we can move that down, please. Thank you.
yeah, to the next page.
This is, I think, PDF 19.
Yeah. Right there, I mean, you're looking at 2 months out of the year where there's zero flow for those water years, and so on as you keep going down through the graph. So I mean, you know,
You're,
what? Sorry, go ahead.
no, you please finish. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just pointing out the fact that, you know, based on these tables, it appears to me that they have, and I can't speak what's happening, you know, if you look downstream exactly where you get changes, but you know, at least at Alisal Bridge is it shows that you got, you know, a couple months out of the year where you have zero flow, and that would suggest to me that, you know, most time of the year you got some sort of flow in the river.
Okay, that's your interpretation. I appreciate that. In other words, just if I'm summarizing this correctly, looking at these tables indicate to you that there tends to be flow somewhere in the 9 to 10 months a year at Alisal Bridge.
Objection. The questions that I was asking were about underflow, and this is a complete discussion about surface flow. So, and you know, my line of questioning across was about the connection between surface flow and underflow, not whether there was surface flow at any given time of year. So I think this is getting outside the scope of cross-examination and frankly, Mr. DeMuha's direct testimony.
The reason I'm going into this is because Ms. O'Sullivan was talking about the disconnection of underflow, okay? That only occurs when there's no surface flow, as I understand the testimony. And so I'm just trying to show whether or not there's surface flow, in this case at Alisal Bridge, during certain times of the year that's not reflected in some of the questions and exhibits that Ms. O'Sullivan showed Mr. DeMuha. So that's the purpose of this line of examination, but I'm done at this point.
All right.
Yeah. If I may, Ms. Kinsey, I guess there's nowhere in my cross-examination was I making the point of whether connection or disconnection is only occurring when there's no flow in the river. I would actually disagree with that premise of Mr. Puccini's questioning. So I think there's a little confusion.
Yes, and I was going to follow up with my own question on exactly that point. So I do think there's some confusion which we need to sort out. But what I plan to do is let Mr. Puccini finish his redirect. I think we'll have a couple questions that Mr. Puccini actually, I'll give him a chance to respond if he has any additional redirect based on my questions, and then Ms. O'Sullivan, you'll have a chance for recross. So
and just to close this line of questioning out, I would just ask Mr. DeMuha, when there is surface flow in the river, does that mean that the underflow is connected to the surface channel?
That would be my assumption, yes.
Thank you. Do you recall a series of aerial photographs? I'm going to strike that because I understand the objection from Ms. O'Sullivan, and I think I would probably get the same one. So I will, I'll strike that question. Just trying to wrap it up here. Thank you for your patience. Mr. DeMuha, did you have anything else that you wanted to add or supplement that you did not get a chance to add during the questioning by Ms. O'Sullivan?
There are a couple things I don't know if it's allowable.
Try them out and we'll hear whether they are.
I'm going to object to a open-ended question about anything else that he wants to talk about. I think that is not a fair redirect.
Well, maybe Mr. DeMuha, if you can give the topic, just a general topic of what you wanted to respond to.
Well, it'd be along the lines of I guess invalidators of TICE and some of the assumptions that are needed with TICE to make it more robust, I guess is the way to put it.
And I guess I would object to that. Mr. Puccini already asked about it, so asked and answered, and I still assert that that is outside the scope of my cross-examination.
I think that's fair for now. Let's not go there. I'm going to have a question about Tice in a moment, but so we may end up there, but we'll see. Let's were there any other topics, Mr. Demuha?
Not that I can think of right now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kenzie. I'm done with my redirect of Mr. Demuha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Piccini. Mr. Demuha, you've been going for a fair while. I do have a few questions. Do you want to take a break? Or would that be helpful, or would you like to just power through?
Yeah, why don't we just get done?
Okay. Let me see. So first I wanted to follow up on this most recent question about surface flow and underflow and connection, because I think I want to make sure I don't have a misunderstanding here. I understood you to say that when there's surface flow in the channel, that one can then assume that there is interconnection between the surface flow and the underflow. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way that this has kind of been defined, the system is underflow isn't underflow surface flow. I mean, they're one and the same.
So following along there.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kenzie, could he just repeat that? It cut out for me for a second.
Okay, if you would, please, Mr. Demuha, repeat your response.
Well, I guess what I was saying is that this is identified as underflow, correct? I mean, if I'm incorrect, my point is that underflow is considered, to be surface flow, correct?
Well, let me try again. Let me rephrase this. So, when there's surface flow in the stream in the Santa Ynez, would you conclude that is it fair to assume that there is interconnection with the source of water for the proposed wells in well site B? And maybe your answer is you can't answer that. I don't know. I just want to make sure my understanding.
Yeah, I think in many cases, yes.
I'm sorry, did you say in many cases, yes?
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole concept of, releases from the dam and recharge and I guess the easiest way to say it is in most cases, yes, there's when you have surface flow in the river, there is going to be connection. Except for in times maybe when I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I'd like to follow up because I was going to try to come up with except for times, but you're the expert. At what times might there be an exception to that assumption?
Well, I'm gonna go back and say that yes. I'll just say yes, that if there's surface flow in the river, then there's a connection.
So following up on that, and maybe because I can imagine a situation where this is not the case. I'm imagining a situation where the subsurface levels are so low. Let's say it's a severe drought and everyone's been pumping like crazy, right? The subsurface levels are so low, but there's also a release from the reservoir so that there's surface flow. Is that a possibility that there would be in that case where there's very low subsurface flow and release from the reservoir, that there could be disconnection?
Yes.
Okay. And then I wanted to follow, thank you, Mr. Demuha. I wanted to follow up briefly on what I understood, and I hope I'm not opening a whole Pandora's box, but maybe this will be helpful for me, about the Tice analysis. I think I understood you to say that a Tice analysis relies on either many or all of the same assumptions as a Jenkins analysis. Did I understand you correctly?
Not all of them, but some of them are interlinked. They're the same.
And maybe that's the source of my confusion. Is a Tice analysis something you can do that's sometimes applicable even if there's not a stream? I understood it to be a drawdown analysis. Does there need to be a stream for a Tice analysis?
Yeah. No, absolutely, you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this may be a question, I'm not sure if you're in a position to answer this one, and please just tell me if you're not. I know you've suggested that a pump test would be a more accurate way to assess potential impacts to the stream. In your opinion, do you think it would be possible to use data from some other well? I mean, there are other wells along the stream. Would that, and it doesn't seem to me that in any of the parties in this proceeding have presented evidence based on actual data from pumping and stream flows, and maybe it just doesn't exist. But do you think that could also be a useful source of information absent a pump test of the actual wells that are going to be used?
Well, I can tell you from my experience, and it really does rely. It really does. It's based on whether or not that you have wells in an area that are of similar construction and depths, right? And same kinds of formations. I mean, that is a tool that you use quite often and we haven't talked much about this in this proceeding today, but specific capacity is one of those tools kind of that's used quite a bit to help come to an understanding. If you say you're going to drill a new well in a certain area and you have existing wells in the same formations and you have a certain specific capacity, estimation of what you would expect to get when you drill a new well. I mean, a lot of times people don't have the money or the funding to do, exploration drilling or whatever, test wells, whatever, and you rely on specific capacity values from other wells in the area, and you can take that and you can calculate what you expect the new well will generate based on those values. However, I'll just say in certain instances and cases where I've experienced this, it's not always accurate. Sometimes you go in with the expectations based on those values, you drill it, you put it in, and then you get something entirely different. So the practice of pump testing your wells after they're installed is absolute. It needs to be done because that's the information for that particular well that's going to give you the data set that you need to know what kind of a pumping equipment you're going to use in the well and what kind of a sustainable flow rate the well can maintain. So yes, I think in every case, if possible, a proficient and professionally done pumping test is needed to answer those questions. And if you have the availability to use observation wells while you're doing that, then you should do that as well. And I think in this particular case, being that we are centered on the impacts to the river, it would be my strong opinion and recommendation to put in monitoring wells between those points so that you could see more directly to what the impacts could possibly be. And we have to realize that SY water 111 is 1,000 feet away from the river. So, I mean, is that a 100% guarantee that that's what, is it 100% tied to what's happened in the river? It's the best that we have at this point. I wasn't able to look at any other wells in the area that would give me any kind of inclination of what the pumping in the area is doing to water levels in the valley there. I mean, sometimes you use what you have, but in this case, and as important as it be, the pump tests are needed, and I think the monitoring wells are needed to get a sure or better.
I'm sorry, Mr. DeMuha, I'm going to stop you.
Is going to affect water levels.
Mr. DeMuha, let me have you pause. If you can just repeat, you cut out for a moment there. If you can just repeat your last statement, if possible, that would be helpful.
Okay. I think that pump tests and monitoring wells are an essential part of this project, and I think you need them to understand more fully what the impacts could be from these wells.
Understood.
Did that come through?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. DeMuha.
Yes.
I appreciate those explanations. I'm going to look to my team. Mr. Anderson, do you have any questions for Mr. Demuha?
I do not.
And Mr. Wooldridge, do you have any questions for Mr. Demuha?
No.
Okay, thank you. That finishes my questions. Based on my questions, Mr. Puccini, do you have any? I think it's fair to give you. Do you have any additional redirect?
I just wanted to, I think it came out, but I just wanted to have Mr. Demuha make the distinction between wells for pump test versus wells for monitoring and observation. I think he would.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, if you could just distinguish those, Mr. Demuha, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so your pumping well would be, I guess in this case, would be the new wells being installed by Solvang, and then the observation well would be the monitoring wells where you could watch at a distance from the pumping well between, say, the river and the production wells, what the aquifer's doing while you're pumping. Observation well, basically. You're observing, water levels as you're pumping.
And okay, I think that's clear, but just really quickly, what is the purpose of a pump test specifically?
Well, specifically and just real, it's to understand what the sustainable flow rate is for that well. Meaning, how much water can you take out of the ground without, I guess for an operational aspect, before you draw the waters down below the pumping bowls and render the well useless, right? You want to be able to maintain your water level in the well so you can extract water at a sustainable rate.
So it's for production. You want to know what the production is going to be.
Yeah, you want to know what a safe, sustainable production is.
Got you. And the monitoring wells, by contrast, help you determine the effect of that pumping at some distance, correct? In terms of underflow. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
That's all I had, Ms. Kenzie.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn back to you, Ms. O'Sullivan. Do you have any recross based on that redirect and my questions?
Yes, just very briefly. Ms. Mullen, if we could pull up CDFW 92, please. Okay, and if we can go to page 9, please. And Mr. Demuha, while we're getting there, I just want to confirm that you recognize CDFW 92 as the report that discusses the parameters for a Jenkins analysis that we were discussing earlier, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And if you could take a look at that small one-sentence paragraph in the middle of the page there that starts with "a well does not." Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, if you could just read that, get familiar with it.
Let me see if I can move this out of the way here. I got faces over the
Oh, yeah, if you can pull the document viewing window wider, if that's blocking some of the document.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying there.
Okay,
I see what it's saying.
Great. And so it does say a well does not have the potential to deplete a stream if, and I'm going to skip a little bit past the "and," if the well is pumping water from an aquifer that is hydrologically disconnected from the natural channel or the subterranean stream, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this statement in this document that you cite in your testimony explains that a well does not deplete a stream if the underflow, which is the aquifer in this case, is disconnected from that natural channel of the stream, correct?
So some type of barrier restricting flow.
So yes, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And if we could pull up CDFW 86, please. again, this is the hydrograph we're pretty familiar with at this point. And again, for this station that you're showing the riverbed elevation in red there, the subsurface water level is below the riverbed elevation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they're disconnected, correct?
Yes, based on this graph.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can pull that down, Ms. Mullen. Thank you very much. If we could bring up Solvang 179, please. Sorry, yeah. Thank you. And so we're back at the groundwater sustainability plan for the central management area. Do you see that, Mr. Demuha?
Yes.
Okay, and if we could go to page 445. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Yeah, I think we're going to need to make it a little bit bigger. I'm looking at that. I want to look at the section that's 2C.5-3.
Okay.
It's a little small for me still. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Much appreciated. Okay, and if you could just see the first two sentences there, starting with groundwater supplies are projected. And that first sentence is discussing the groundwater supplies projected, future conditions, and they use the unit, the amount of 4,222 acre feet per year, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the second sentence in this paragraph explains that table 2C.5-3 summarizes the total water budget, which that 4,223 acre feet per year is one of those numbers. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and if we could just scroll down, Ms. Mullen, 2 pages to see table 2C.5-3 again. I think we'll have to scoot over a little bit to the, yes, and one more page. Thank you. And sorry, it's in a book format, so it's a little, yeah, one more, there we go, perfect. And so I just want to point out that that 4,223 acre feet is there on the right, and so we can safely say that this table is in acre feet per year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all for this, Ms. Mullen. Thank you. And then I want to briefly touch on Solvang 21. Ms. Mullen, if you could pull that up, please. And if we could just go to the front of the document so we can see the title. And to the second page, please. Okay, and so Mr. Demuha, you can see that this is a document titled Santa Ynez River Water Flows under 3 scenarios associated with the Solvang's River Well project. And
Yes.
You've read this report, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this report is about estimating surface flows, correct?
Correct.
Okay, it does not discuss underflow elevations, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it doesn't make any representations about whether or not the stream and the underflow are connected at certain points of the year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all on that. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. And just on the TICE analysis briefly, you're aware that Mr. Nicely used image wells in his TICE analysis?
Yeah, that's what he indicated.
Okay, and you're aware that he used a Jacobson correction, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and those two things correct for any criteria that are not initially met under the TICE analysis for the San Ynez River, right?
The correction is for, yeah, one particular aspect of it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Ms. Kinsey. Thank you, Mr. DeMuha.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan, and thank you, Mr. DeMuha. I think with that, I believe that completes all of our case in chief witnesses for this proceeding. I want to thank you, Mr. DeMuha, for joining us, for being here. I appreciate, really appreciate your testimony and taking the time to be with us today. And with that, you are excused. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
We are at 11:47. I believe where we pick up next is with the city of Solvang's rebuttal witnesses. My understanding is that we'd hear first from Mr. Nicely. What I'd be inclined to do is go ahead and take our lunch break, but I want to pause and look at the room to see if there's anything we should address or if there are any objections to that approach. Ms. O'Sullivan, does that make sense to you?
Yes, that works for us, and we were planning on having Mr. Nicely go first. So
Great.
Thank you.
And Officer Kunze, this is Tilden Kim. I just want to let you know that Mr. Matt Vanderliden has joined us in the past hour or so.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there anything else we should address before we break for lunch? And I'm planning to give us an hour lunch break. All right, it's 11:48. Let's reconvene at 12:48, and we will pick up with Mr. Nicely's rebuttal. Thank you very much. Oh, and please you go ahead and log off, or you will be booted off and you will have to log back in after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey.